Hello, I'm Becki Young from Grossman, Young and Hammond, and I'm here with my partner, Sandra Grossman. She's just published a chapter in a book about transnational repression, and so we're going to talk about that chapter. Sandra, congratulations on your chapter in AILA's Consular Processing Handbook. Consular processing is a hot topic for immigration attorneys in general, but your chapter focuses specifically on the intersection of Interpol notices and visa petitions being processed at consulates and embassies, including the issue of transnational repression. In my experience, a lot of people are uncertain about what Interpol actually is. Can you tell us a little bit about your chapter?
Thank you, Becki. Absolutely. I'm so grateful to the American Immigration Lawyers Association for their interest in this issue and the issue of Interpol and transnational repression. There's a lot of overlap with immigration law, as many immigration attorneys understand. And basically, the idea of this chapter was to provide both immigration attorneys and those individuals, representing people abroad that have Interpol issues with a guide on how they can best advocate for their clients. And also, of course, the idea is to provide information to individuals who may be the subject of red notices and other Interpol communications that are affecting their lives. So there are a lot of misconceptions, but the idea with this chapter is to start clearing some of those up.
So for starters, what is Interpol and what is its infamous red notice?
Right, so Interpol is not what Hollywood portrays Interpol to be. They are actually primarily a police organization. They're located in Lyon, France, and what they do is provide a platform and a database system for global police cooperation to fight crime. So there's 195 member states of Interpol, and the United States, of course, is a member of Interpol and one of its main financial backers. And what member countries do is use Interpol databases to communicate with each other about anything from wanted fugitives to stolen and lost passports to identifying missing children. There are projects that Interpol works on in order to fight transnational crime, cybercrime, criminal networks. So it plays a really important global police function. And the great majority of Interpol's efforts are legitimate and necessary to help create a safer world. The issue comes up when member countries use Interpol for illegitimate reasons. So to persecute political dissidents or to go after individuals, entrepreneurs, business people that may have fallen out of the favor of the government. And so that's where we need to step in and help advocate for our clients.
Okay, thank you. So tell us how an Interpol red notice or another publication could impact somebody with a US visa application.
Sure. So as many immigration attorneys understand, there's no right to a US visa. It's very much a discretionary benefit. And so it's up to consular officers sitting at different US consulates and embassies worldwide to make a determination as to whether or not someone qualifies for a US visa. And there are many different reasons why a person might not qualify. Some of those are, for example, conviction-based, a person that has a criminal conviction, or a person that has significant immigration violations. Sometimes for foreign policy concerns, an individual might be denied a visa. And when a person has, say, a red notice or any other kind of Interpol action against them, that comes up in consular officer databases. They have that information accessible to them, and it often can and does create doubts as to whether or not that person is eligible for a visa. Now, it's important to understand that the U.S. Department of State, as an official policy, says that the mere existence of an Interpol notice doesn't create visa ineligibility in and of itself. So they're supposed to, consular officers are supposed to look at the whole picture. But in our experience, what we see is that often that red notice, even though it's really not conclusive evidence of criminality, does lead to visa ineligibility. So what we try to do is come up with ways to advocate for our clients before the consulates and embassies worldwide. And that's really the subject of this book.
And so what have you found are the best strategies to advocate for someone who's the target of an Interpol action?
So really, I think what we've worked on here at Grossman, Young and Hammond is focusing on what narrative we can provide to adjudicators, to decision makers at the embassies and consulates worldwide. Because when the individual shows up for a consular interview, they've got this Interpol action against them, and they're very much in a defensive posture. And so our strategy and what we discuss in this book is how to take someone out of the defensive posture into one which shows that they are actually a victim of Interpol abuse, that the information that's in Interpol databases or that's being provided by any particular country, say China, Turkey, Russia, so those are some of the most sort of notorious abusers of Interpol, that even though those countries are providing that information, it's not necessarily true. So how do we change that narrative? Our strategies include actually fighting the red notice or diffusion before Interpol, so taking action before Interpol's, there's an independent body, the Commission for Control of Interpol's Files, where you can file requests for deletion. We can also gain access to the information that Interpol has. Sometimes our clients don't know what they're being accused of, so we can actually file a request for access and get a copy of a red notice. And that's really important in order to be able to understand what the allegations are. And then utilizing the sort of limited tools that we have before the embassies. So for example, when an individual files an application for a non-immigrant visa, like a tourist visa or a temporary work visa, we can use that application form to start to introduce the narrative of victimization. And then of course, probably the most crucial part is really helping to prepare our clients for the interview, the sort of 90-second elevator speech that they can convey to the consular officer. So those are some of the tools that we talk about in this chapter.
Your chapter refers repeatedly to transnational repression. What is transnational repression and how does it impact your clients?
Right. So transnational repression has gotten a lot of attention lately because when you look at reports from different organizations like Freedom House or Fair Trials International, or even U.S. State Department reports, it's on the rise. And basically what it is it's when foreign governments intimidate, stalk, persecute people across national boundaries. And the way that sort of manifests itself is through assassinations, illegal deportations, abductions, digital threats, family intimidation, and of course, Interpol abuse. So, one of the sort of positive developments that we've seen in this community of advocates that are fighting transnational repression is there has been new legislation in the United States to try to, it at least acknowledges transnational repression. The Department of State has acknowledged it and is committed to pushing back against these sort of efforts by other countries. So overall, the concept of transnational repression is incompatible with human rights and basic dignity, and it's up to us as advocates to come up with legal strategies to fight this transnational repression wave that we're seeing.
And what type of clients have you assisted with Interpol matters in the past? In what situations can you help with Interpol related matters?
Yeah, so it's actually a really broad variety of clients. You know, a lot of people think, okay, Interpol abuse, so they think it's, you know, a journalist, a human rights defender that's being accused of some crime in, you know, an autocratic nation. And certainly we have those types of clients. In those cases, part of the strategies that we utilize in order to change that narrative of being a criminal are asylum cases. Sometimes we look at complementary human rights filings before the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights. And so you have this very typical sort of dissident that can certainly be a client. But then there are other individuals, business people, entrepreneurs, who aren't your sort of typical, you know, sort of human rights advocate, but in fact, for one reason or another, may have fallen out of favor with any particular government. And those individuals also become victims of human rights abuses. And we employ similar strategies for them as well. And one of the dynamics that we've seen lately is that autocratic nations are filing requests for cooperation through Interpol by alleging sort of ordinary law crimes, embezzlement, corruption, but really those crimes are pretextual. So it's up to us to uncover them and present this narrative to decision makers.
Well, that is all of my questions. So thanks so much, Sandra. It was great to talk to you about your new book chapter. I think this is a really important topic.
Thank you, Becki.